And this is our Hot Topics segment. My name is Dr. Sharon Michael Chadwell, and with me today are my co-buddies, Chris Dawkins and Caleb Alexander. So this week we have seen a lot of stuff going on, compliments of 47. Now, our Hot Topics is works like this. We have 4 topics today that we have advertised, but sometimes after we have advertised the Hot Topics, 47 is the gift that keeps giving. Something else happens. So we may have a fifth or sixth one just to bring in. But today, our major hot topics involve this: Senator Cory Booker's speech. The next one is the gutting of Health and Human Services, the Smithsonian Museum crisis, and then finally, the child labor issue down in Florida. So I was one of those persons that I did not realize that Senator Booker was going to filibuster. But when I woke up 7 o'clock the next morning and saw him on TV, and I had my TV on, and I realized, wait a minute, this is not no regular speech. He is actually in a filibuster mode. So I stood with him the entire time. I left my TV on the entire time. When I had to leave the house, he was on my phone. But I was completely enamored with him in his ability to talk for the citizens. Did you guys watch it?
I did.
Thoughts?
I did. I caught a lot of it.
Thoughts?
My thoughts is, that to me seemed to be him throwing down the gauntlet to say, I'm going to speak for the people. And nobody else had ever did anything else until he did that. So it appeared to me that a lot of other people are growing a little bit of cojones by what he's done. But prior to that, nobody had done anything. So I'm very proud of what he did.
I think it's saying a lot of people saying that speech gave him life. You know what I mean? And so it kind of galvanized the Democrats. So like it did give them cojones. It gave them a spine. You know what I mean? A North Star, a guiding light. You know what I mean? And what to talk about and how to resist. And so it did bring enthusiasm back, because it was just a lack of enthusiasm. A lot of people were just feeling down and disconcerted and not knowing. You know what I mean? Because it was just being bombarded by this administration daily. You know what I mean? And so that speech kind of revitalized the resistance. You know what I mean? So, but the other notable thing about that speech, a couple of notable things. One, I love it that he broke Strom Thurmond's record.
Oh, yeah.
And so Strom Thurmond's filibuster was actually to deny Black people the right to vote. And so Cory's speech was actually pushing forward the idea of democracy. So it was no better filibuster to break Thurmond's filibuster than Booker's filibuster. Right. So the other thing is, can Senator Booker sustain the momentum that he's created? Because I think that a lot of people are going to point to this speech as synonymous with Trump coming down the stairs. Is this Cory's throwing his hat into the ring?
I think you bring up a great point. Can he sustain it? I don't think it's his to sustain. Okay, he's thrown down the gauntlet. It's now what are others going to do to jump in the fight and to help him? I think he's already done his deal. If you're talking about throwing his hat in the ring to other, I think he solidified himself as far as that's concerned. Whatever he decides to run for, he now has a face. Cory Booker now has a definite face.
Right.
But as far as the House or the Senate, I think that it's up to them to decide how they're going to join in the fight and to be able to help and be combative for good.
Right. No, so I was saying, when I was talking about sustainability, is he going to be able to sustain the momentum surrounding his favorable media because I mean this obviously put him on a trajectory to become the Democratic front runner. You know what I mean? And of course, you're going to have Shapiro throwing his hat in the ring. You're going to have Newsom throwing his hat in the ring. So will Cory Booker be able to sustain this momentum that he's built from this speech going into the next election?
You know, when I was watching it, 25 hours, 4 minutes. first of all, as a triathlete, I had to wonder, how do you prepare your body to sustain that type of rigor that he put himself under? First of all, he couldn't sit, nor could he leave to use the restroom. So there are things that you have to do to the body to do that. So he was saying that what he did was he literally stopped eating Friday before that session, and then he stopped drinking water the night before. And I'm certain that he, went us under medical guidance, but just to sustain his body, because if you were watching him, there were parts you saw him, moving back and forth, doing everything that he could to help. He leaned over on the podium, which was great. His legs, he said, were starting to feel funny because he was dehydrating. But his sustainability to do this was, I don't even know if I want to use the word admirable. I'm going to say it was amazing that he was able to sustain himself. And I did not know that maybe that was his goal, to beat Strom Thurmond's record. Maybe it was.
I don't think it was to start off with. He said what propelled him is when he found out he was that close to Strom Thurmond's record to continue to go to beat that. But I don't think originally he had sought out to do
Because he was I think the room next door to that area was the Strom Thurmond room. So maybe he felt that spirit from over here saying, "You can't beat me. You can't beat me." But I was just amazed. I mean, and the other thing that amazed me was this was a thoughtful, well-prepared event, meaning that he didn't do like Ted Cruz and read from children's books. He didn't do like Strom Thurmond and read from the telephone directory or whatever they had. His entire presentation was on the issues at hand. He was reading those letters from his from the people.
Yeah.
constituents.
And then, of course, the senators in the room, they did a great job of giving him some type of break, and they did their speeches. Questions. You can ask your question, but I'm retaining the floor. So I was just completely appreciative, if you will, of what he has done, what he has thrown. He has definitely thrown the gauntlet down. So now it's time to see what's the fruits of his labor.
I think, and the other thing is, though, just seeing resistance. You know what I mean? Even it comes from this form. I think it not only is galvanizing the Democrats, but I think it also galvanizes and gives a little bit of strength to some Republicans that are hesitant to resist.
Because didn't Rand Paul vote against Trump? Something that they were voting against. Was it after the speech?
It was. I think it did come after the speech, but what it is this idea of tariffs. A lot of them are against tariffs. A lot of them are hearing from their constituents. It's bad for business. We've lost. I've seen estimates as high as $7 trillion has evaporated. $7 trillion in wealth. And so he's hearing from folks.
Well, I hope he's hearing from the doggone penguins down in McDonald Island. What are they gonna do? Give rocks? What are they gonna do?
I don't know who made this list. You know what I mean? So you had this abandoned islands for the penguins, and you had Diego Garcia. There's no Diego Garcia, but U.S. and British troops. That's it. So who are you who you putting tariffs on? Your own troops? It's stupid.
No.
I mean, whoever made this list, it's ridiculous. Yeah.
But kudos to
Cory, right?
Cory Booker. We're down here in Texas, and all the way, sending kudos your way. Okay, the next topic is the Smithsonian, but in particularly the African American Museum of Culture, the Smithsonian, and the direct attack that Trump is taking against his museum, saying that the museum is divisive. Now, this museum really did come into play under Obama. So I can't help but think that this is another way of taking a swipe at Obama. But it's kind of like, really? This is the African American Museum. So I think the Holocaust Museum is part of the Smithsonian. But is he going to take funding away from the Holocaust Museum? The uh, uh, African American Museum of Art. They're going to take away funding from that. You know, they're talking about doing a wind museum. Is that a Paul's project? So he wants to defund this institution.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that. I mean, it's kind to me that's incredible. That is absolutely incredible. There were hoods. White folks were walking around here in Klan's hood. You know, that's for real. But I guess he doesn't want that in there because it's divisive. Well, they were divisive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean it's taking this is complete assault on Black history, right? It's I'm just like, you can't hide what your ancestors did. You know what I mean? And so your ancestors were murderers, they were rapists, they were the most horrible, they were enslavers, they were the most horrible human beings on the planet. And no matter what you do, you can't hide that history.
Mm-mm.
You know what I mean? And so to me, it's just this attack on Black history.
Strom Thurmond. Maybe they need to remove. Maybe they need to remove that room.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know.
That room definitely needs to go. You know, maybe they should ask his Black descendants
Elsa,
their thoughts.
I
about
bet
the
you
room.
Elsa would say remove it.
Now, did they just defund the African American Museum or all of the Smithsonian?
Well, this one in particular, but the Air and Space Museum, I don't think it has anything to worry about. But this one has definitely gotten into his radar.
Oh yeah.
Even the director was fired this week.
Not fired.
Okay, it's a cracking duck, okay? But he was given time, he was put on leave.
Right. And he was on leave when he got put on.
Put on leave, right?
So that's a cracking duck,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
But this is getting ridiculous in terms of this anti-DEI movement. It's kind of like, what's next?
But it's an anti-Black movement. You know,
Anti-Black movement.
yeah, we can just call it what it is. It's an anti-Black movement because they, for some reason, think that DEI is strictly a benefit to Black folks, and not thinking how much it benefited white women. But it's an anti-Black movement. It's an administration full of apartheidists and racists like Stephen Miller and Bannon and all the rest of the Nazis. And so they have this complete white nationalist racist regime that's in power, and they are doing everything they can to attack Blackness, Black history, Black folks, any kind of Black initiative, Black economics, Black education. Is just an anti-Black movement.
So if I was looking at how much the Smithsonian, that particular museum gets, it gets about $1 billion. So in terms of, now this is where we show that we're not going to let that museum door shut down. We're just going to start making donations. You think that's going to happen? You think we're going to start seeing the stars, the athletes, our 1%, wealthy 1%, start kicking in to leave that museum open? What do you think?
That's a good question. Very good
will
question.
see.
I don't know.
We'll see. I mean, I don't put a lot of faith in a lot of our 1%, because I mean, there's a lot of initiative that they could have already invested in as far as Black higher education, Black scholarships. With our 1%, there should be no reason why any Black kid who wants to go to school can't afford to go to school because of our 1%. But they haven't thus far pooled their resources to make things happen. And so I question a lot of their commitment to our community as a whole.
To our community folks, what are your thoughts? Do you think our top 1% are high yielding athletes and entertainment folks? You think they're going to kick in money annually to support this museum so that its doors does not close?
Who's going to ask them?
They don't need to be. Why?
I
Why
think-
should? Why do they need to be asked?
Because I don't see, if they didn't need to be asked, then I would agree with you. It would have already been done. And, you know, sometimes you have to bring even the obvious to people to make them to do the things that you want them to do. If it's not asked, a closed mouth doesn't get fed. So I do think that they do need to be asked, for the simple fact, I never even thought about it until you just mentioned it. And the question becomes, is if you do give to them, then what does that do to the federal money that they were getting or may get in the future? And how does that? So it's a strategic type of situation that you need to look at as to, if they do donate money, how does that happen, or how does it affect the museum? So yes, in answer to your question, yes, I do believe that they need to be asked.
I don't, because a lot of these athletes, they know where they came from. You know what I mean? And so you could just look at what they're doing for their communities.
So why
They know where they came from.
So why hasn't anybody until Harrison Barnes given money? We've had the Spurs in this city for a long time. Harrison Barnes was the first time to give money to an HBC out of all the people that's been there. No Avery Johnson, no Tim Duncan, none of them. None of that ever happened.
Well,
Why?
that answers your question. They know, these athletes know where they come from. They know their roots. They know the beginning. How many of these athletes are turning around and reaching back to the inner cities and helping those communities, or putting jobs in those communities, or helping to fund education in those communities, right? So they know where they come from. We don't have to tell them where they come from. You know what I mean? They're men, and they have
I'm
to
not
take.
saying tell
What
them
I'm
where
saying
they
is,
come from.
but they need to take they're grown. A lot of them, you know, they've gone to some college or whatever. They know where they come from.
So you're going to depend on that?
No,
Not asking them?
what I'm saying is, why do we need to ask?
You may, okay, yeah, maybe we don't need to ask them, but the question is are you going to risk not getting a donation by not asking them? That's my question.
They
Well, you
know.
remember the United Negro College Fund,
And it's still around.
and it's still around. We don't hear too much about it. So maybe we need to start the United African American Museum, you know, College Fund and culture. In other words, this is where we either put up or shut up. And to see this museum possibly shut down because of the lack of funding, to me, is a no-go.
Yeah.
It's a no-go.
No, I agree. And I'm not saying that it's either or, right? We can have both. But, you know what I mean? And so my thing is this. So, yeah, preserving our history is extremely, extremely important. You know what I mean? You have to know where you came from in order to know where it sets our bearings. At the same time, though, what about our future? You know what I mean? And so you have generations, even this, what we're talking about today, right? How do you get these generations into school? How do you get these generations into college? We're in danger, man. Black males are an endangered species, and they're not going into higher education. I mean, education, period. They're disappearing from college campuses. We need to focus on that, focus on the future, and get these young men into these programs, into college education. Because if they're sitting at home and they're not doing that with themselves, they have two paths. They're either going to be out there at Meadowlawn pushing up daisies, or they're going to be in Bexar County Jail ready to catch the chain and go to TDC. You know what I mean? So my thing is, yes, history is important, but what are we doing? Let's also focus on investing in the future and saving these young men. That's how we save the race. That's how we create future generations of entrepreneurs who can turn around and reach back and save museums and save history and become senators and governors and become the next Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. It's about investing in the future. And I'm not saying we can't do both, but I think that if these athletes or entertainers, if we're going to ask them to do anything, one of our biggest asks would be to invest in the future of our people, of our race, invest in these kids. It's the only way we uplift ourselves is through education.
So we're talking about the kids right now and education. So let's skip on over to Florida, where they are trying to pass a bill that really reactivates child labor. And how they're going to do it, how they want to do it is to where kids can work late in the night, overtime. So having gone to class, been a classroom teacher and everything, having kids who had spent their nights under their bed because of drive-by shootings, if these babies are out here, and these are like 14, 15, 16-year-olds, they're giving them the agency to where they can decide whether they want to work late, okay? So I knew that in Florida that they were losing a lot of their labor because of the immigration issue. I thought that how those farms were going to be managed was going to be by the private prison system or the prison system in general. Somewhere it did not dawn on me. It did not dawn on me. I didn't think that mean, okay, to where you're going to look at the youth to manage those farms.
This Florida we talking about.
But the reason why I'm bringing it up, because if Florida gets away with it, what's going to prevent Texas from doing it? What's going to prevent Mississippi from doing it? What's going to prevent those states who are already on the low end of the spectrum of education from just kicking this in? You know, again, I'm saying it every week. Ignorance is the handmaiden of tyranny. So are these states purposely going to try to keep our kids ignorant? That's the question.
Why not?
Yeah.
Bill Gates has already, the other day, Bill Gates said, look, AI is going to take over. What was the percentage? 90% of the jobs? It was a high percentage. They don't need educated workers no more. They got AI. They got computers to do everything for you.
And look at these pictures that Carl is putting up in here. Do we really want to see our kids doing this? Do we really want to see our kids doing this?
I'm surprised they got them doing that because AI is going to take over that too.
Well, this is in.
That looks like in Guatemala or somewhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, AI is going to take over. So I mean, they don't need an educated workforce anymore. That's why they can deport 40, 50, 60, 70 million Latinos. They don't need them. The only workforce they need now is you to make up the motel beds. Go, you know what I mean? Maybe cook some food,
They
McDonald's.
even got the little robot running around,
Yeah.
on the floor.
Cleaning.
Yeah. They don't even need that. You can go in McDonald's right now and do your whole order on the board and not have any interaction with anybody working.
Right.
The only thing they need them for is to make sure the burgers don't burn.
Right.
You know what I mean? But no, it's just it's taking over, and
when they can get an AI person to do that, they'll do that too.
they'll do that too. Yeah.
So all they're doing is just legalizing child labor
Correct.
For right now.
for right now.
Because they don't even need them for that. They got combines and giant tractors that are automated, that giant harvesters. They got irrigation on timers. They replace a lot of the farm labor. They don't mind getting rid of all the Mexicans because they don't need it. They don't need as many anymore. All that farm labor is automated now.
Well, let me ask a different question. We just saw the graphic of Ron DeSantis, and you talked in a previous segment about Cory Booker and was he positioning himself. Is Ron DeSantis positioning himself to possibly run to make sure that he continues with the type of MAGA stuff that we have seen previously and his failed attempts before? Is this an attempt to be able to do that and to talk to those farmers or those other people to say, I'm going to give you free labor or cheap labor in these kids?
So basically, you're telling me, and I'm going to go ahead and say it, that the MAGA wants to maintain the jet stream of bullshit.
Ron's gonna run, and he don't care. He does not care about JD Vance. Ron is running.
I ain't never heard that before. The jet stream of bullshit.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's kind of like, really.
Yeah.
So, we say, and what's really aggravating to me is this. They talk about, well, China is doing this. Why can't we do this? I'm going to say France. France is doing this in terms of beating United States in this. Africa, who they are really afraid of, is doing all of this and beating the United States. So if they're beating the United States, to me, there is a level of education needed to do what those countries are doing. Maybe they don't depend on educated force because you got a lot, you got a lot of child labor issues, you got a lot of labor issues. But for us to stay ahead, you got to have some education also.
Maybe not. I just came up with an idea. Bringing the manufacturing back to America, using Caleb's example of AI. What if you can get rid of, because the most expensive item to anybody's bottom line is labor. So if you could bring manufacturing back to America and tell all of the corporations, we can automate it all here, and you don't need that other stuff. You don't need to go over to China for cheap labor because we're beating the cheap labor because we got the AI.
There's no labor.
There's no labor.
Right. Everything is, it's all robotic.
Right. So we can create.
And so, so if it's all going to be robotics, how does that benefit
who?
It doesn't
Can't
benefit
finish that.
us?
It
It
doesn't.
doesn't.
It benefits.
And I'm not talking about us being black.
No, but it benefits those people who were sitting behind Trump at the inauguration.
Exactly.
All the 1%,
Exactly.
all the billionaires.
Right.
That's who it benefits.
That's who it benefits.
It doesn't benefit none of the American people.
I don't think we've ever agreed on one thing. We all agree on that.
Yeah, no. I tell you what though. The other thing too. I got one more hot topic. And this is an international deal. And so I think that these people are waking people up who they did not want to wake up. And I think that the world is realizing that no, ain't nobody scared of Trump. Ain't nobody scared of the United States.
Well, it's interesting you're bringing that up because last week one of the hot topics was, did U.S. aid hinder Africa?
We talked about that.
Were you here last week?
Yeah.
I was.
Yeah.
I was.
So go ahead.
So one, China just slapped a 34% tariff back on the U.S. So now the tariffs are 54% tariff on U.S. goods. Nobody's scared of the United States. India is reciprocating. Canada is reciprocating. Every single European country is reciprocating. You know what I mean? And so this is the other thing that's scary. The United States, and this is the scary part. Japan is moving closer to China. South Korea is moving closer to China. Do you really want Japan and South Korea and all those Asian countries to move closer to China away from the U.S.? Yeah.
No.
Yeah. And this is the scary part. Germany said, we're going to spend $1 trillion on our military. And they threw in, and on infrastructure. Like Germany needs infrastructure. You know what I mean? Germany's infrastructure is pretty damn good. The majority of that is going towards, that majority of that $1 trillion is going toward their military. We did $1 trillion. Back in the 80s, Reagan had $1 trillion defense buildup, right? That $1 trillion ended up bankrupt in the Soviet Union because they tried to keep up. But that $1 trillion was spread out over a massive Navy buildup, nuclear subs, aircraft carriers, Star Wars, space, new tanks, right? Germany doesn't have a global Navy. They don't have nuclear missiles. Their $1 trillion buildup is going to their Army and the Air Force. Do you want to know what $1 trillion Army and $1 trillion Air Force looks like sitting in Europe?
What?
It looks like France is shitting itself right now. That's what it looks like. It looks like all of Europe is shitting itself with $1 trillion buildup of a German army and a German Air Force sitting in Europe. Germany is on a pathway to tell the United States to go F themselves. They got this. That's what's going to happen. We're acting like we don't need allies and don't want allies. You're going to see what happens when Germany says, we got this, and all of Europe falls into line because Germany is the strongest economy and Germany is restraining itself. That's the only thing that's restraining Germany is Germany. And if Germany decides that it wants to run the EU and it wants to turn the EU into its own image, we're going to get what we're asking for and we're not going to like it.
Wow.
Well, one of the things that when I was drinking some coffee the other day, thinking about all of this, was that the United States has always been arrogant in its dealings with other countries. You go to Japan, and you say, I need help, I need help, I need help, and they look at you like, or so okay, ikaga desu ka? All of a sudden they all come over because you're asking how much something is. If you go to go to Mexico or Spain, we're arrogant that we may not want to speak Spanish, but once they realize you are trying to speak the language of the country, then you get more attention. So this arrogance has been around quite a bit of time. Now, the only problem is that Trump and others like him have been able to plan a different direction over a period of time to where we are now. But now the United States, even though you got Canada to the north, Mexico to the south, somehow this big old massive land is turning into an island. Now, I don't know what's going to be happening down there in Hawaii, okay?
Right.
In Alaska with Russia looking at it. But I know for sure this massive land right here, it's an island.
He's trying to turn it into an island, but he's going to learn that no country can go it alone in the world, especially the United States. We can't go it alone in the world. We need allies. We need friends. And what's going to happen is he's building up a coalition against the United States, where
On purpose?
who is he doing it on purpose?
Yeah.
I think he's just stupid.
Okay.
And I think the people around him are just stupid.
Okay.
And I think they overestimate America's power in the world. You're going to have an EU that's on its own, that's not an ally, that's going to be led by Germany. You're going to have an Asia, and pretty much the rest of the world is going to be led by China. And
Africa is coming
and
on
Africa,
up.
who's going to come up, but they aren't going to, and India that's coming up. You know what I mean? And so it's going to be a world that we ain't going to like to live in.
You know what I think the most
As a man.
devastating thing is going to be, something that you've talked about before, is I think that once the fall of the dollar, or the dollar does no longer become the world currency, I think that's what's going to really be the last shoe to drop. Once that drops, and because I believe that's where the majority of our power is. We have two things that is the majority of our power. One would be that we are the ultimate consumer, okay? We can't be the ultimate consumer anymore if we're not making money, okay? So we can't be that. So we're going to lose that. And then the dollar is that because America is either buying everything, or we were the consumers, and we could do that easily with our own dollars and by the world supporting our dollar. But the world, based on what's going on now, will no longer support our dollar. So those two things alone will be the demise of America.
So remember, China is the world's largest marketplace. India is growing to become the world's largest marketplace. Africa will become eventually the world's largest marketplace by far. Nobody's worried about American consumers anymore. American marketplace, nobody cares about it pretty soon. But yeah, the day somebody wakes up and looks at a dollar and says, this is just a piece of paper. No, we don't want this. Give us gold.
But let me challenge you on that when you say nobody wants the American consumer. When we have money and we're able to buy, and I say we're the ultimate consumer, we're the only person with a TV in every room. We got 2 cars, and maybe more than that. Some places I go, they got cars everywhere, in the house. We buy everything. This is the place where people even buy pet rock.
Right.
Okay?
But we buy it from one place.
Where? Okay.
Everybody else buys from America. Everybody else, every other country in the world has a trade deficit with the U.S.
But my point
The
is,
U.S. only has a trade deficit with China.
yeah, okay, but if we can't afford to buy it, who does China sell their goods to?
The rest of the world. That's why they're developing
they're
a market.
not- they're
That's
not-
why they're developing a marketplace in Africa.
I understand that, but they're not the type of consumers that we are.
Who?
The rest of the world. They're not going to buy as much stuff as we buy.
Yeah, but if you have, put it like this, you have 300 million Americans, but you have pretty soon you'll have 2.5 billion Africans.
Okay. I got it.
300
I
million
got it.
Americans are
I
not
got
going to
it.
outspend.
I got it.
You know what I mean?
I got it.
2.4 billion Africans.
Okay.
We're 2.8 billion. So I mean, it's just or even 1.4 billion Indians, and that economy is emerging. And so, and they have a strong consumer economy. The same thing with Africa. They want stuff too. You know what I mean? People want stuff. They want to improve their lives. They have beautiful homes and everything else. They buy cars. We're not and the other thing is we overestimate our spending power in this country because America is full of pockets of people who can't afford things and can't afford to buy things. And we live on credit.
Yeah, but Caleb, I was just going to say that we buy stuff we can't afford all the time.
Yeah, we live on credit. You know what I mean? And that's the difference. And this is the difference between much of the world. American wants to buy an iPhone, put it on credit.
Right.
And African wants to buy an iPhone, he's taking $1,800 to the
Right.
store.
Right.
That's the difference.
Right. Okay.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
African wants to buy a Mercedes. He's taking $40,000 to the dealership.
Right.
America is taking $5,000 down payment and financing the rest.
Okay.
So you know what I mean?
Right.
So we consume, but we can't afford to consume. We're consuming, but we're debt.
Right.
Debt.
So you mentioned cars.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw an article talking about America is going to experience the Cubanization of Canada. I mean, of Cuba, of motor vehicles. Meaning that when I forgot of old cars, talking about when who was the president that put the sanctions against Cuba?
Kennedy.
Kennedy? Was it Kennedy? Okay, so when Kennedy put those sanctions against Cuba, they were unable to get the parts needed to maintain the cars.
Right.
Hence, when you go down to Cuba,
Right.
you see the old cars.
Right.
So are we going to experience this Cubanization effect in the United States on vehicles because we can't afford to pay for the parts?
Right. Well, I mean, and again, it depends on how expensive these cars are. They're getting expensive, and with these tariffs,
Kia getting expensive?
all of them. Oh my God! You know, you price a truck these days. A truck is $60,000-$70,000 for a truck. You know what I mean? Or any of these vehicles. I think there may be a handful of cars now that are probably still under $30,000.
This is, we'll probably have to wrap this up at some point, but I don't believe people in the next 20 years will be owning cars because cars will be so expensive. You will, if you need a car, you'll call for a car, come get you, take you where you need to go. If you want to take a long trip, you'll rent a car and take that trip and use that and come back. You will no longer be able to afford to buy a car, have insurance for it,
Right.
and the amount of electric because they'll all be electric at that time. They're not going to be able to afford to put that electric on your bill at home to be able to afford all of that. So I don't look for folks to be able to own a car in the future.
We've already seen it. People aren't or slowly not even being able to buy houses these days.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So
Exactly.
we're already seeing it.
Right.
I got one more hot topic I want to throw in here before we sign off, and that is the gutting of HHS. Now, Kennedy, who's the Secretary of the Department of Human Services, has already said that Muskrat has fired too many people. And there's a lot of services that department had that we no longer have right now, especially the research side where someone was watching all of these diseases. Measles is now, there's a small outbreak in Houston. So it's coming down IH-10 from El Paso. So we got that going on. People won't be able to, the vaccine, no vaccine argument is out there again. But we needed the Department of Human Services. Now, supposedly the Department of Education, some of the stuff from there is going to move over to that department. And to be honest with you, when we came back from Japan in 1973, a lot of public education was under Department of Human Services.
Right.
But this gutting that has been done, and a lot of the secretaries of these different departments, human services, I don't know about Miss Wrestling Queen, but a lot of the, Secretary of State is even saying the same thing. There was too much gutting.
Yeah.
Too much gutting. So what are the implications for the Black community on these, especially with the gutting of a lot of services from Department of Human Services, HHS? So what do you think there's going to be implications for the Black community?
Is the CDC under HHS?
Yep.
And I mean, and a lot of the programs that fund uh, low income, a lot of programs that subsidize low income healthcare are going to be gone. You know what I mean? So that's how it's going to definitely affect our community. A lot of the funding that goes to a lot of
Sickle
community,
cell research.
research on diabetes, stuff that affects Black community. But just a lot of
Alzheimer's.
the funding in the inner cities is going to be gone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I just can't understand how you can tank the whole country at one time. Everything. They got
Yeah.
every department cabinet head is in charge of getting rid of everything
Yep.
in the department. So, I mean, there's not any one place that is totally functioning, is there? I mean, I don't know.
I don't even think the military is
No.
functioning.
And
at
I
this
think
point.
he's trying to cut 90,000. He's trying to cut 90,000 troops from the military. Um, it's insane. Everybody is rearming, and he's cutting.
So let me ask this. So next year when the budget comes around, should we be able to balance the budget at that time?
No, because they cut taxes for the rich people. So next year, it's still gonna be talking about there's not enough money because he did gave Musk and everybody else big, huge tax cuts.
This is really
it is, yeah.
outrageous.
I think that if you didn't believe this man was a Putin's agent, you better believe it now because he is destroying the United States, and he's.
I know this is not part of the hot topic, but why didn't they put tariffs on Russia?
Why you think they put tariffs on Russia?
Russia was the only country they ain't put no tariffs on.
Why you think he ain't put tariffs on Russia?
In North Korea. So I'm going to end.
North Korea.
Yeah, North Korea was in tariff.
We
don't get nothing from North Korea, do we?
Guess not.
They don't get nothing from us.
Right.
But I mean, it's still. But even then, Russia, you could. I mean, they actually lift sanctions on Russia. They've actually ended all investigations on Russian oligarchy. They ordered the Justice Department. I think we talked about 3 or 4 weeks ago. But no, they're not touching.
So
Russia.
are we poised to become in line with Russia? Is that where we are?
Boys.
He wants to be this strong man dictator. He wants to have parades with tanks rolling down Washington D.C. I mean,
So is that where we are now? I mean, are we in line to basically? So if everything went, let's say, the way he wants it to go, are we going to be in line with Russia?
I think if it goes the way he fantasizes about and he wants it to go, he would want us to be in line with Russia and China. And he would want to see a world with spheres of influence, where Russia has their sphere of influence, where China has their sphere of influence, where America has their sphere of influence.
We ain't got no sphere of influence no more.
So I mean, he's thinking, in his mind, North America, South America, Central America, Europe, Greenland, Europe, and he's thinking, this would be America's great sphere of influence, and he's thinking this is the 1900s and 1800s, and he wants to expand American territory. He thinks he's Teddy Roosevelt, you know what I mean? And that's why he wants to take over the Panama Canal, and he wants to take over Greenland. In his mind, he thinks that territorial expansion will make him one of the great presidents, you know what I mean? He's insane. He's an old man who is probably suffering from early dementia. Early onset. I heard he had a senior moment the other day. They had to guide him back to the podium.
Well, the guy that reads his. There's a theory about this guy that reads his executive orders. They really think that's his nurse.
Probably so.
So we're going to get ready to end here, but I want to read something of Barack Obama. Former President Barack Obama has broken his silence, and I'm going to read what he said. Imagine if I had done any of the things Trump is doing now. Imagine if I pulled Fox News' credentials from the White House press corps. Imagine if I had banned law firms from government buildings just because they represented parties upset with policies my administration had initiated. Imagine if I had punished people economically by dissenting from Affordable Care Act or the Iran deal. Imagine if I had deported students who protested against my policies. It's unimaginable that the same parties who are silent now would have tolerated behavior like that from me or from any of my predecessors. And so, this is contemporary black voices. This is our hot topic segment, and as we say, we are telling our stories our way. See you next week.
That might have been our longest one.